Hello, welcome back to the Anti-AI Podcast. With me, I have my co-host Iris.
Hi.
So Iris recently had a big personal move. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I just moved from Europe to the United States after 14 years being abroad. So it has been quite a wild ride, and that's why we've been a little bit on hiatus because I've been just very busy with getting human things put into place. Unfortunately, AI can't move for you. So we've been working on things on the back end of everything, and now I am solidly back in the Arlington, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, where I will be for at least the next year, if not longer. So
I'm so glad to see that you finally settled down.
yeah.
In my personal news this week, I unfortunately lost my job, so I've also had a hectic time trying to apply for new jobs. And as all of our listeners probably know, we do this as a part-time since it feels like anti-AI is not a movement that has caught on yet. But hopefully, some of the news stories we talk about today will spur some action from the listeners.
Yeah, definitely.
The first uh, crazy news story I want to talk about today is in regards to something that happened just today, actually, or yesterday, depending on time zone. But there's this big buy now, pay later Klarna company. He revealed that he has plans to cut their current workforce by 50%. That's right, 50, to replace it completely with AI. When I saw this story, I was mind blown. It really feels like we're tiptoeing the line of what AI capabilities can do to our society. Iris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's crazy. I mean, over the past few months, I've also had some personal experiences with layoffs due to AI, and I don't think we're quite there yet, honestly. We were speaking before this podcast, and I was mentioning how last night I was on the phone with a major um, telephone company here in the US trying to get new numbers and everything set up, and I was on the phone for 3 hours dealing with robots that were not understanding exactly what it was that I was searching for, which was a technical glitch. My husband's phone was no longer working, had to go to the Apple store, spend time there, and then be on the phone with this service provider. But I could not get in touch with a human. So it was very frustrating to say the least. Good news is that we got everything solved, but it did take a lot longer than it probably would have if a person had just answered the phone. Um, I'm not going to name this company because I'm still using them and I think that they're doing the best they can. But, I think that we need to be really careful about biting off more than we can chew in terms of technology when we're not really ready for it yet. So,
Yeah, to add some more context to the news story, I think the majority of their layoffs will come from the customer service side of things, in the
right.
sense that what Iris experienced will become more common practice.
Yep.
Um, Basically, they're going to reduce the number of actual live agents in the hopes that, a chatbot can just figure out what the customer needs and just like keep bouncing them until their problem is resolved, right? But I think we touch upon this before, at least in our personal conversations, is just this pivot that these big companies are doing with adopting AI in the customer service side of things. Uh, I think I think it's crazy how fast everything moved, right? We went from a couple of years ago where, you have your basic click a button for for a response, and then their chatbot, their quote unquote artificial intelligence, directs you to a help page with all of like a big wall of text, and you just expect it to read it and come to a conclusion of your own. But now we're past that. Basically, it's no longer you click a button and it gives you a response. It's like they're trying to pretend to be humans and talk to you in that manner.
Yeah. And they're, I mean, I'll give them credit. I think the programmers are doing the best they can, but like again, like they're just not quite there yet. It's not functional, but they're rolling it out like it is the same level of customer service that we're used to when dealing with human beings. And I would say it's akin to like the self-checkout at the grocery store. Like you still need a person that can card you, right? If you're buying alcoholic beverages, for example, or you still need at the self-checkout at McDonald's, you still need someone to override the system. So I think that's where it seems like these companies, these huge companies, are just like missing the point. Like they are not, they just completely surpass the human element, and that's not effective.
Yeah, part of it I also think is the fact that currently Klarna is a private VC-backed company, I believe.
Mhm.
What I see out of this news story is they're positioning themselves to be, quote unquote AI powered and have the bu buzzword plastered all over their news
Right,
site. And as you can see, is already drawing up headlines with, you know, quoting 50% of the work workers are going to be replaced by AI bots, essentially.
right,
They are going for an IPO later this year. So I'm thinking they're either trying to clean up their balance sheet or this is just a big PR move to kind of get more big players behind them. And ultimately, I think this sets a industry standard. Yes, there are a lot of buy now, pay later programs or companies, but this can be, widespread adopted by uh, most tech companies with consumer facing like client support, right? And that to me is the worrying thing as, ultimately if Klarna sees success in their IPO as a direct result of, using AI buzzwords, it could
right.
lead to a shift in what is acceptable by companies.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They're good. They're definitely paving the way for this to happen more. Um, and obviously, as an investor, you want overhead to be as low as possible. So, um, makes sense.
It's feeling more and more dystopian.
Yeah.
Iris, you had some thoughts on the whole buy now, pay later program as well, right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get too into the weeds on it because we have a few other topics that we want to cover, but I think that the when you mentioned dystopian society, like uh people are, in my experience, especially having just moved back to the United States, where this is not a thing in Europe, for example. So the buy now, pay later mentality, or just charge it, put it on your credit card, um, pay in multiple payments over time, that is something that is happening more and more. I've noticed, and I don't think it's really sustainable. So on the one hand, we have AI taking over jobs, and on the other hand, we're having people expect the same level of service that they've always had, but without paying for it. So, I mean, I think it's only a matter of time when, if unless you want a robot delivering your food to your table at a restaurant, like there's going to have to be some kind of a I don't know. I don't know what the solution is exactly, but there's going to have to be some kind of negotiation where AI can't be the be all and end all of service providing jobs. So customer service, customer facing positions. It's not realistic. They're trying because obviously it's cheaper, but it's not going to be sustainable.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can look towards our, political candidates for some guidance or regulation.
I was just going to bring that
Recently,
up.
which is a funny thought because I don't know if you saw this, Iris, but recently in Wyoming, they had a mayoral candidate who
Mhm.
pledged that they were going to govern by a customized AI bot. Uh, well, thankfully, the end result was they lost the race, but
Right.
isn't that a crazy news headline to be looking at?
I think it's wild. I mean, On the one hand, when I saw that when you shared that with me, I was floored just because I'm like, okay, let's break it down. How much are we spending in higher education? How much are we spending in people like getting an education to think for themselves? And then you're gonna go ahead and outsource actual governing to AI? Like that to me makes me think, okay, well then my taxes should be zero because what am I actually paying for? Like it doesn't make any sense. Um, Not to mention the mistakes that could be made, the legal loopholes that could be thrown in the mix. You're going to have lawsuits coming out of the woodwork with people that are actually studying the laws regarding policymaking. And as someone who has a policymaking background, like I find it completely not offensive necessarily. Like I feel like they're trying to get the most bang for their buck, but I can't swallow it.
Once again, I think this is a case of where they're trying to put AI as the buzzword for everything.
Yeah.
The end result was that he only got like 327 votes out of 11,000, which is a tiny fraction. But if you think about it, that means some people still voted for him
Yeah.
just because AI was mentioned, right? And that thought right now is funny for us to laugh at, but what about the people that don't come out public? How
Yeah.
can you trust your politicians don't just go to ChatGPT and type in a prompt to say, what do you think my next policy would be, should be structured around if you were to give some suggestions? Now, granted, the person will still hide behind their own persona as if the policy is their own, but it could quickly go out of hand as ChatGPT has already been found to have inherent biases in there, right? And if you have
Yes.
top government officials consulting it as if they are an independent consultant to make policies, that is a scary thought to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure it's already happening. I mean, I've seen it happen in, I mean, you can tell when ChatGPT has written an article that you're reading online, but there's no way to oversee it right now. There's no oversight, there's no regulation. So how can we be sure that our politicians are actually writing their policies? That Yeah, sorry, you just gave me like shivers on with that thought. But that's why we're here. That's why we're discussing these topics. So, we have to stay vigilant.
Like you
Feel it.
mentioned about higher education, it's like that meme that kids always joke around, right? It's like when you let your friend copy your homework, you say, "Oh yeah, you can copy my homework, but change it so it's not too obvious."
Yeah,
Well, that might be a very real case in real life, When I
yeah,
think of the politicians, how do you know that whatever policy they come up with is not just a regurgitated like mess from AI policies?
yeah, yeah. No, it's a big deal. It's something that I don't think enough people are talking about, and I'm like that was a news story. Should have been like 5 years ago. I'm pretty sure that everyone's doing it. I I don't know, but as Bill Maher would say, I just know. Like, I don't have a quote for you or like a source off the top of my head, but I just know it's happening. So, yeah,
Yeah, even you know, you think that only our prominent leaders are using ChatGPT, right? But there's another story that came out recently where ChatGPT or OpenAI had to come out on their own to specifically ban some Iranian operatives from influencing the US election. Now, why is that relevant? Because I don't want to talk too much about it, but the Israel conflict
yeah,
is not in the Iranian operatives' best interest, right? So the fact that OpenAI had to come in and basically ban their accounts shows how powerful that these AI tools have become to where foreign intelligence are using it for bigger purposes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we already know about trolling and phishing, and obviously the internet is a dangerous space, but with AI being a part of it, it just makes it even more tricky to deal with and like to control. So I think we would be on the same page to say that if anything, anti-AI, okay, we can live with AI if it's going to be around and we have to live with it, but let's have some guardrails in place. I and I would love to hear what our listeners have to say about that. Where have you noticed that there are guardrails missing? So
The
that
part that rubs me the wrong way about this story is that a private company,
Mhm.
OpenAI, can dictate what they deem as being permissible
Right.
for foreign operatives. Does that not shock people? Like, you are putting all your faith into OpenAI. Sure, it's a big company now, but it's still a private company.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, these are all people behind the scenes, right? They have their own biases, their own interests. Well,
Yeah.
okay, they banned the Iranian accounts, but what about the other accounts that
Yeah.
are all over the world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And then they publicize that action, but then they don't necessarily publicize other actions or lack of action in other areas. So yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head with that point.
It feels like we're talking about Meta invading user privacy once again, where, billions of users' data points are centralized in Meta's control. Yes, Meta took a sidelines approach to kind of appear innocent, even though they are notoriously bad for their abuse of their policies, right?
Right.
Looking at OpenAI, I see it being in a similar category. It's like, sure, they think they have, morals, but what about as AI gains more and more adoption across the world, there will be limits to the moderation team's effort to shut down, quote unquote, all of the, borderline illegal things that people are using generative AI to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It really feels like a uphill battle, I'm telling you. Like, how are we not up in arms the fact that, like, enemies of the state, like Iran, can use US based company tech to, you know, do ill will against the US. That to me is unacceptable.
I mean, the only explanation I can come up with would be that there are stakeholders within the United States who have interests in this kind of shenanigan like going on. So, um, and that's the problem is that there's no regulation. And so there's no way to know who is actually on whose side.
I mean, that's a basis of capitalism,
Yeah.
money talks. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, OpenAI probably made a lot more money for illegal uses than,
I'm sure.
legal ones.
Yeah.
So that's all. That's what I'll put my final note on. And
Okay.
it's just kind of depressing when you look around and these are the news stories that are front headlines. And after you get past the initial shock factor, you realize the dystopian future is not that far away, right? It's like it's here. Like,
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we're in it, but I do to end on a positive note, I do think that if we can regulate AI and use it for good, then it's an extremely valuable tool. But it's like it depends on how it's used and how we treat it. And you like wherever there's greed, obviously there's going to be uh, an abuse of technology. So you know, it's I think there can be many good uses for AI for like knowing when to plant the right seeds at the right time or like for medicinal purposes, but I don't think that's where we've been going in the last few years. So,
Now that you're in DC, do you want to maybe talk about where you could help or the listeners could reach out to us if they want to actually make policy implementations with
yeah. So, if people have ideas or would like to be advocated for, I'm 12 at antiai.com. That's my email address. And I will be happy to get in touch with Congress members and other people on the Hill if I feel like there's a real interest, and I do think there is. So I've only, like I said, I've only been here about almost 2 weeks now. But as soon as I get my footing, I will be here as a a voice for people who are interested in this topic. And I'm happy to hear you out, jump on a phone call. Obviously, for the purpose of this podcast, I'm anonymous, but if you do send me an email, I will reach back out to you.
I think that's a great place to leave off. We
Okay.
have lots to do in this anti-AI battle.
Yes. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye.